Welcome, ladies and gents, to the Gower Brewery. Seen some of you before in a previous guise with a different brewing hat on. Dragged out of retirement. So the Gower Brewery side of things, the history side of it, be better off with one of the two Chris's, the owners here, but I know one of them's down watching the Swans, which is why I've been dragged in today, which is onerous task. I'm going to drink some more beer and get my lass to pick me up later, but not to worry.
Oh, what a shame. Good idea. Overtime? You look gutted.
I'll make do with free ale, I think, rather than overtime. I can live with that. But I'll say hopefully the other Chris Stevens will be popping in before you all have to leave us. But basically, the first brew was put in on the 11th of the 11th, 11, which is nice and easy to remember. And I think it was something that the two Chris's plus Matt, who is now the brother-in-law of one of the Chris's. It's a very Gower thing going on down here. I don't want to get involved really. But they've been toying with this idea for years, I think. So they must have had a particularly good night on some beer or vodka or other and actually started to spend some money. This building apparently was just a proper shed with all sorts of walls and dodgy ceiling and everything. And I think in the space of, I think it was a little more than 6 weeks, we just handed one of the Chris's is a sort of building contractor, so he knows how to do all this sort of stuff. Stripped everything down, sort of got the room to how it is, and they purchased a 5-barrel brewery from a brewery, I think it's out in Suffolk. Got it in. As I say, first brew went in 11. I was drafted in, I think they were putting brew number 2 through. I'd had a brief hiatus from brewing. I was going off to study to be an electrician because I didn't know what else to do apart from brewing. And the only stuff I had to do in the brewery, the only stuff I couldn't do in the brewery, I had to get someone in, was the electrician side. So I thought, I should be a Sparky. I'll do everything then. I had a phone call saying they wanted someone to come in to do a bit of consultancy work. Sorry, for those of you who don't know, I used to be head brewer at Thomas Watkins for longer than I care to remember. But initially I was going to come in for sort of 4 or 5 days a month as a bit of consultancy, make sure that they were going in the right direction, doing the right stuff. And within about 3 or 4 weeks I was here 5 days a week. And this is it full time again now, so I haven't got my electrician tools out of the garage since I've been here. So on the brewing side, so we started with 3 fermenting vessels, which are these wooden clad ones that we've got. Plan is to get the wood off and eventually I hate wood in a brewery. But it became obvious fairly early on that these 3 fermenting vessels were not going to be enough for us. So we took the dimensions of FV2, we got a local company to manufacture another 6 vessels for us with the idea of keeping 3 and selling 3, trying to recover some of the money that they'd actually spent already. As it turned out, by the time they'd finished making the 6, we needed all of them. So say more often than not, we've got sort of 8 or 9 of them full at any one time. Back in May, we had the first bottled batch of the Gower Gold done, which is the biggest selling beer that we do by miles. Sort of 3,000 barrel batch, and on Monday the 7th batch of 3,000 litres, 3,000 litres is going to be going out. Yeah, being a bit optimistic, give us a year or 2 for that.
Might need a bigger building for that.
Sorry?
Might need a bigger building for that.
Just to get the barrels in.
There is talk at the moment, say Chris and Chris are nothing if not committed. I mean, there's already talk of sourcing a 40, potentially 50 barrel brewing plant to sit on one of the Chris's farms, which is scary. I didn't think it was going to be getting that big this quick, but it should be good fun. So I don't really need to run through the brewing process at all with anyone, do I? I suppose everyone's been around that many breweries, you know what malt and copper and hops and stuff is.
Well, I think it's one or two people who, well,
perhaps only been to one brewery before, so if you can do it briefly, it might be useful.
Yeah, okay. I'll time myself, see if I can. This one I can do.
What brief will you do it?
We've got a stopwatch on.
The challenge is on.
Alrighty. Okay. Brewing, potted brewing. Kicks off in this little area over here. So I suppose this end is the brew house. Hot water in a little silver tank over the corner there. Mash tun. So we get the crushed grain and the hot water mixed in the mash tun. Sits in there, 64 degrees C for an hour. That's where we get all the starches in the grain converted into sugars. For those of you who haven't seen a mash tun before, there's a false plate in the bottom with little holes in. So that keeps all the grain in the mash tun and allows all this very sugary, protein-rich liquid to run off out the bottom. So that's the wort. The wort runs into a little underback through the pump and into the copper. As we're transferring the wort across, we spray hot water onto the top of the mash. So that hot water percolates through, washes all the sugars out of the grain, so we're going to get the maximum extract out of the raw materials. Transfer takes approximately an hour. Once we've got all the wort into the copper, we've got electric heating elements in the copper which will bring that wort up to its boiling point. Typically it's about 40 minutes from getting up to the full level for that liquid to start boiling. It'll boil for an hour. During that time we're adding in the hops. The boil will actually extract the bitterness from the hop into the wort, so that's how you get the bitter flavours into the beer. And the main function of the boil is to sterilise the wort before it goes downstream. So at the end of the hour, elements are knocked off, and similar to the mash tun, a false plate bottom in there with little holes in, which will trap all the hop leaf. Because we're trying to sort of clear the wort at each process, so we're not going to run into any clarity issues downstream. So the beers then, or the wort rather, run from the copper through the little heat exchanger on the wall there, where it's cooled down from boiling point down to about 21-22 degrees C. Comes out of the heat exchanger then into obviously one of the 9 fermenting vessels that we've got. Once the brew is in the vessel, we'll then add the yeast. We're using a freeze-dried strain of Nottingham ale yeast, which is pretty robust really. You can be a bit of a bugger with it and it'll still ferment. But the beauty of it is it doesn't really impart any particular yeast flavours to the beers. So what you're tasting with the final product is just the malt and the hops that are in there rather than anything that's come through from the yeast. Brews will take about 4 to 5 days to ferment. The lagers, using a different type of yeast, they ferment at a lower temperature. Ales typically 20, lagers we ferment those down at 12 degrees C, and that can take anything up to 7 to 10 days to ferment out. Actually the bottled lager things is beginning to increase a bit, so we might even have to squeeze more fermenters in here because it becomes a bit of a bottleneck and I've got it tied up with lagers. So at the end of fermentation, beers are going to go to cask. Once the gravity's got down to a certain level, each of the vessels have got cooling jackets on them. So we'll cool the beer right down to 6 degrees C before it's finished fermenting in the fermenting vessels. That beer is then put into the casks. So the little bit of sugar left in the beer will be fermented by the yeast, which is still in suspension. So there's a fermentation taking place inside the cask, and it's that fermentation which is the conditioning bit of cask conditioned beer, and that's basically finishing the fermentation so you get into the sales alcohol, producing all the CO2 so you're getting the natural carbonation and fizz in the beer, and also developing all mature beer flavours. Beer going into a cask day 1 is a completely different beast to after 5 days conditioning. Stuff the bottle, we let that ferment all the way out. So once we've got consistent gravity reading over 2 days, we'll then chill that right down and try and drop everything out of the beer and the lager as much as possible so it's almost bright when it's pumped out from the vessels into some tanks which go into the back of a lorry and then whisked off to Rumney, who do all the bottling for us. and so that's all filtered, pasteurised, carbonated. Oh, that's not pasteurised. I think we've got the sterile filtration system in there, carbonated. So it's not bottle conditioned beers. So it's filtered, carbonated stuff. The reason for that really is it was just a punt as to how successful the beers were going to be. We've got a much shorter shelf life on the bottle condition than they have with the sterile fizzy stuff. As it turns out, we've probably been alright with bottle condition because it's flying out at the moment. And that's about it really. So that's what I've been doing for the last sort of 25 years really. Sorry, question, yeah?
Yeah, how long do you ferment it for if it's the beer's going to go into the bottle? Because you use 5 days for the casks.
Yeah, typically it's going to be an extra 2 to 3 days in the fermenting vessel if it's going to go into bottle. So with ales, typically you've been knocking the fermentation off or putting the cooling on after about day 4. So once the gravity's got down to about 10, 12, chill it right down. So by the time it's cooled down, it might have knocked another degree out around about 10, 11.
Yeah.
When it gets in the cask, put into the 2 big containers we've got in the brewery yard there. So it's kept at 9, 10 degrees C in there, so it'll warm up a little bit.
Yeah.
So it'll use up about another 2 or 3 degrees of sort of sugar in the cask to give it the condition.
Right.
Let's say with bottled stuff we need it to go all the way out because it's not going to condition in the bottle. So we need to get all the alcohol and all the flavours and everything in the vessel before it's pumped away for bottling.